All right. So I am so excited today because I get to interview my son, Michael Humphreys. Hi, Michael.
Hi. Would you like a water?
I would love a water. Yeah, give me a water. That's perfect. Today he has a new album coming out this May, right, Michael?
Yes, this May 11th, which is soon.
It's kind of a perfect timing for this to come out and just... So tell me a little bit about this album and how it came about.
Well, this album was always something that I had in my head. I started working on it. The first track that I had for it was about 2 years ago. So this was actually, I knew that I was going to release another album after Space Wolf, but I didn't know when, and it was so not what I planned. It was so in God's timing. But so I started it right before Space Wolf. I released Space Wolf, which was like in 2018. August 6th was when I released that in 2018. But so like August of 2018, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, I mean, it's been the accumulation of me in different places, of me in not only just like physically in different places, like in Boston and Santa Ana and LA, recording these things, but spiritually too, just in such a journey, such a journey that God has brought me through, and all for you, just it's all for God, and so from my perspective, but then it's all for you guys too, the audience, the people who are there. But 2 years ago, that's kind of when I started it, and the name came about probably about a year ago, but yeah, over 2 years ago was when I started working on this. So,
wow, that's a long journey, and you're right. It's been across a country, basically, right?
Yeah, cross country yeah.
To Boston, and a journey back to LA. And so, how many songs do you have on this album? What can people anticipate? How many do you have?
14 songs.
Okay.
So this is like, I feel as if this is a very, very full album, if that makes sense, because, in the past, my Space Wolf, I believe, was 11 songs, but this is 14 songs, and whenever I think about like 14 songs, it's like always like, that's an album, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's like whenever I look at a John Mayer album, Continuum, I think it's like 16 tracks or 14 tracks, but it always seems like the albums that I love the most are always like 14, 15, 16 songs, and I really was modeling it after, the artists that I love so much, and to have that many songs was that, but it was really the accumulation of like 90 songs,
Wow.
So I spent probably the last 5 months were really, okay, which are the 14?
Huh.
Because I was originally like, I'm going to release 18 songs on this album. That's where I was at. And, there were so many songs that I was like, oh, this is going to be like number 3 slot, like, which is, if for people who don't know, like album slots like number 3 and 4 generally tend to be like the songs, it's the trend has kind of gone away over the past couple of years, but for so long that was kind of like the thing, was like number 3 and number 4 were like the songs. And so
now tell me about that, because I really, I'm a mom, so I don't really know about that.
Well, you're a super mom, so you know a lot about it, but yeah, it's like, so I wanted to have the best songs I have, and I wanted to be something that was still me. And so there was so many songs that I was always like, even two and a half years ago, I mean, the session I'm talking about was with a session from a band that's also a feature on the album, Apollo Bebop. And we did a session in Santa Ana, and we did I think 5 days of sessions, but we recorded like 6 songs, and I thought all those were going to be on them, but none of them ended up on the album, but a bass line from it ended up on the album, or a snare hit ended up on it from the album. So it was really cool to see like all these different songs, and then these are the gems. I really feel like.
Yeah, I definitely, after listening to your album, feel like each song is a gem. Each song is really meticulously done. It's really good. So, what would you say was your inspiration for this album?
It's funny that you say that, because the album is an accumulation of people who have inspired me, like people that have given me wisdom and given me strength. And there's even a section, you know, the very last song where my mother's talking, you know, on the album, and
I didn't know he was doing that.
at the time, you know, but that's an example of like these people like spoke into my life. They spoke truth and life into me, and you know, just allowing myself to give this to other people, you know, is like everything. You know, like I have Eric Thomas, who's a motivational speaker, who's actually now on TikTok, which is he's crazy enough. He's been on TikTok for really long, but anyways,
yeah, let's talk about that song for a second. We're going to go into the songs. You have 14 on your album. So that song's called Accountability. And I want you to talk about that song because to me, every time I hear it, it speaks to me.
Yeah, I mean, the name of it, Accountability, you know, it's, if you listen to his section when he speaks at the very beginning, you know, he talks about, you know, we always demand levels of precision from other people, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna give you $20,000, make it into $50,000 in 30 days, and if they don't do it, we have this attitude of hate towards them. But how often do we say we're gonna do something and then ourselves we don't follow through with it? We don't take accountability for our actions and our words and what we want to have happen. And so that's the whole memo. And there's this guy named David Goggins. I hope that I'm pronouncing that name right. But he's an ex-Navy SEAL. And I heard a quote from him earlier this week. And he's like, you need to go to war with yourself. Wow. And it's like, you need to go to war with yourself because we are our own worst enemies and we will pull ourselves down before we pull other people down. And I think the entire idea of the album was learning that if you're really in the Spirit, if you're really in the Holy Spirit, if you're really in God's presence, then it doesn't matter your situation. Your situation is regardless because your spirit is centered on God. And so, you know,
I love that you're saying that right now because I think something I've learned in the last 3 years is what you speak over yourself is so important. And also what you speak into yourself. Like you have to understand that it's life and death, right? Would you say that? Like, so speaking life over your career, your music, or the things that you want in your life is so important, right? Yeah. And so that's really awesome.
Your words have impact.
Yeah, meaning.
And it's not a coincidence that the first book of the Bible, you know, God spoke things into existence. It's not a coincidence that it's because the spoken word has something to do with the spiritual nature of life.
Right.
And you know, and when we speak things, you know, there's a couple verses in the Bible that say demonic forces can't hear your thoughts.
Right, they can't.
They can't hear your thoughts, but they can speak into you. They can speak thoughts and you can hear them.
Right.
But they can't hear your thoughts, but they can hear your spoken words.
Right.
And so what you speak into life is heard by the universe.
Wow.
In a very literal sense, you know?
That is so well said.
If you just think about like the spiritual battle that's happening, when you speak things, it's there.
Well, just what you just said is such an image in my mind. You know, it reminds me of the cartoon with kind of the devil on one side, you know, the little angel on the other side. And it's so important that we take those thoughts captive, right? Wouldn't you say, like, when those thoughts come in, you really have to analyze if they're good or bad. And I think Accountability is such a song that really addresses, like, your thoughts and your thought life, and especially during this time, right? Wouldn't you say during this, when we've had this outbreak, it's so important not to get in your head.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's such a funny thing because I never made that song with the intention that it was going to be the psalm,
right?
You know, on the album.
Yeah, it's
I never made that. I made the song in 30 minutes. You know, I made the song in 30 minutes.
Don't tell me that.
No, well, it was funny because I came to the studio and I was like, well, I want to sample some stuff that inspires me. And so I found Eric Thomas, that one speech that I love, and then I found Dan Mohler. And each of those speeches have had such an impact to me in my life. And, you know, tying it back again to the album, is like, the album is all for you guys. It's all for you. And it's me saying, hey, here's some wisdom that I've gotten. Please take it and pull from it what you will to better your life. And so there's a part in that song Accountability, after Dan Mohler speaks in that chorus, where it's just the piano and the guitar. And I specifically made that portion for a reflection time, because you hear these powerful statements, right? Dan Mohler's talking about a man or a woman whose spouse left them or cheated on them, right?
Wow.
And he's saying no one what other people say about you means nothing unless their name is Jesus. Unless it's the word of God, then unless it's spoken life, and unless it's truth, that's not who you are. You are who God says you are. And so that time after that second chorus is really for people just to sit and just think, wow, these people just spoke life into me. Am I going to receive that? Wow. Or am I going to reject that? And then that's your choice, you know. But I specifically made that portion of the song for people to think about it.
I'm kind of blown away right now as I'm just processing this too right now, because I'm blown away that you actually thought about the process of sitting and in a song, which is I think it's very interesting, like a pause in a song, because a song seems so fluid, right? It goes so in order almost, if you will, but to have a pause in a song is actually quite brilliant. I think it's so thought out. I just am kind of blown away by that.
Some of the greatest revelations I've ever had have been in my car, listening to music, and just having that time alone by myself where it's like I'm just driving and I'm just listening and I'm just there with my thoughts. And, you know, so you know, just giving someone that time to say, hey, I'm not going to force anything on you. You think about it. You make a judgment call. It's up to you.
Wow, Michael. And he's my son. I'm just that's a proud mama moment there. Okay, so the album starts off with this song. He told me to say this, KND, because I want to say Kids Next Door, because that's just...
Well, it's codename Kid Next Door, and anyone who grew up like in the 2000s knows that TV show. And it's so funny, that song came out of nothing, you know?
Yeah.
It was my buddy, my longtime, one of my best friends, Ryan Mango, who I've played music with my entire life. He was down and we were just spending some time together, and we weren't even going to go to the studio. But it was like midnight rolled around and we're just hanging out, you know, we just got some in and out, and we're like, well, why not go to the studio right now? Why not go do this? And we're like, okay. Yeah. And so then we spent the next 3 hours making just the beat that you hear at the front, just to realize that it was to be sampled for the entire song. And so then we made the beat, and then we made the drop, and we're like, and then I remember he said to me, quote for quote, he's like, now we need to get someone to rap over it. And I said, no, now we're gonna have FutureSelf rap over it. and so I was like, nah. And so then the first time I said, I don't know how it came to me, because I was just thinking, I want something nostalgic, right?
Right.
Because we're both very much so in the lo-fi, you know, knowledge, you know, Anderson .Paak, you know, feel, where it's like nostalgic ideas, vinyl textures are so cool. I was like, what is the most nostalgic thing I can think about? And it was like, oh, codename Kid Next Door. And so then I was like, and so that chorus just came to me.
Takes me back.
Seriously, I mean,
as a mom,
that was like one of the first TV shows I ever watched.
I can remember it.
Up.
That's what's so cool. Is I actually remember that TV show, and I actually really liked it, because he and I don't know, this is going to be, we both love, like, we love superhero movies. I mean, well, he knows I'll drag him to a Marvel movie every time, because I love Marvel, and I'd prefer to see an action movie over like a gushy movie. Yeah. I'm just that mom. So, anyhow, yeah, that's great. That's the beat on that is just, it's so catchy. It just really has a vibe to it. And,
well, I was definitely thinking like 21. I was right off the cuff of, I had just seen 21 Pilots twice, you know, once at a festival I'd played at, and then another time in San Francisco. And they very much so have that robotic, you know, voices, you know, huge drum bass sound. And so I was definitely modeling it after that.
Hey, that kind of leads me into a question, actually. I think a lot of people don't know what you've kind of done. You're a little bit of just a resume of like the scope of the music you play, like what you play from, I think, classical to jazz. And can you just tell, maybe in the last 2 years, like your music journey from when you graduated? He graduated from the School of the Arts, Orange County School of the Arts. So just maybe tell everybody just a little bit of your journey.
Yeah, well, I went to a private music arts high school which is kind of like if you've ever seen Victorious, the show, you know that's my school basically. But anyways, the last 3 years of my musical journey have been solely who is Future Self as a sound, in the sonic space of music. It's like I no longer care about who I want to sound like. I just want to sound authentic.
And I'll say that this album really reflects that. Wasn't that the first thing I said to you? The first thing I said to Michael was like, this sounds like nobody. This sounds like Future Self, just you. And I said, that's what's so cool. I hear the influences of all, like, I hear classical, I hear jazz, I hear R&B, I hear so many influences, hip hop, just so many things in those songs, but the sound is completely unique to Future Self, which I think is really cool to see that. So yeah, go ahead. So you went from School of the Arts.
Yeah, so I went from there to the New England Conservatory of Music, and then I left after a semester.
But you got a lot out of that.
I got so much out of that, and life is a journey, and the places and the times and the events that we're in right now have impact on us years in the future, and it's not something that you can see everything in the moment. Like right now, this conversation, I know it's being live streamed and stuff, and people are going to see it. And it's like God uses every little moment for His glory, and as much as I can be a vessel in that, but going back to the question,
so true.
I've just really, the past 4 to 5 years, I just needed to find the people who were the best musicians in the world. And that's kind of been my quest. And that was my quest in going to the New England Conservatory of Music, was I want to play with the best musicians in the world so I can be the best musician.
So who did you get to work with when you were at the New England Conservatory?
I got so many
incredible musicians and
so many
composers,
people,
right?
but I think, just so many incredible people. But I think the coolest part was playing with the people who are my age. The people who aren't someone yet.
Right.
Who are coming up. The people who got into Juilliard.
Wow.
The people who were like the cream of the crop.
Right.
And so that was kind of like, I think that was the best thing. But I think the greatest learning experiences are when you're playing or performing, right? Because that's when you learn the most. And so playing for the Boston Ballet, composing for the Boston Ballet.
Will you tell me a little bit about that real quick? I don't know if people know about that. So go ahead.
So my sister is a top tier ballet dancer of the world, and she invited me. She said she needed some music, and so we basically, over the course of the past 3 years, I composed 3 ballet pieces for her to choreograph to. And so what an honor it was to perform at the Boston Ballet and to perform with the dancers there, some of the best dancers in the world. But, just those experiences of writing for ballet or writing for these big festivals like Boston Calling, I learned so much not only about myself, but about God and about, my musical journey and who I want to become. And so, I had to write 7 EPs in order to get to this, and it's funny because this is going to be, I think, my 9th release. And the first one was an album, and all the other ones were like EPs and stuff, and then now 2 singles. But yeah, it's such a journey to get here, and so God's timing.
What was it like? Because I know Boston Calling is canceled this year, but last year, what was it like, just as a musician and a performer and an artist, to be able to perform your music? Because you tell the audience what you did for Boston Calling. It was kind of cool.
Well, it was a tribute to the 50th year anniversary of the Beatles' White Album, and so I was afforded with the task of trying to take these songs that I grew up with, listening in the car. Some of the first songs, I think one of the first musical endeavors or journeys that I remember is listening to Hey Jude in the car on repeat, with my parents, but that's not even in the album, but just a glimpse and, like listening to Rocky Raccoon, and so it was such an honor for me to go through my childhood and remake these songs how I heard them, because, I think that's my favorite thing is, taking stuff that already exists and making it completely into something new.
It's honestly,
It's called White.
it's
by the
called
way.
White on Future Self's page on Spotify, but it is it's my favorite before this album, just because the way you redid the Beatles is just so innovative, and I think that speaks to this album, All For You, coming up. You know, that it's innovative, it's new, it's fresh, it's something that's not out there, and that's what I feel when I see your music and hear it. So All For You is the new title of your album. Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that I really love that name. Like, even just going that, I think you put so much thought, like Space Wolf. There was so much thought into that one, and there was so much thought into White even, and just so tell me a little bit about All For You and what that means, and what the album is, why it was titled that.
Yeah, well, All For You, from my perspective, it's all for God. Because I have to give everything in my life first to God, because then everything falls in your lap.
That's right.
And I think
That's an amen.
and I think that's kind of the message I want to convey to people is like, listen, when you prioritize God first, then everything else it just happens, because God is the center and God is the peacemaker. He's the Prince of Peace. And so it's like when you just prioritize him and make it all for him, then it's there. But it's all for you in the sense that it's also for all the people listening. You know, it's for the wisdom that I'm trying to take it.
Right.
Take it. This has helped me so much in my life. Please take it, and hopefully it will help you in some way. You know, and I think the whole album, you know, there's like songs like Finding Myself, and, you know, songs like Royalty, you know, talking about what God has given me through other people, and just saying, please take it, because this will help you in your life.
Yeah, that's really incredible, actually, because so many times we hold on to things, you know, and being able to give something and just be so vulnerable and give a piece of yourself that is actually, it's humbling sometimes, right? And I think that's what frees you a little bit. Like, to take down the walls and the pride and all those things out of the way, and just open it up for just God to be able to use you, like, as a vessel, like, kind of just through these things. So that's awesome. I love it. I love the title. I love the artwork. Who did your artwork?
My cousin Canyon Gem, who's
Canyon.
fantastic. And I mean, we worked on that for like 3 months straight.
Yeah.
I mean, every single day it was another revision. It was another revision. Oh, this isn't good enough. All these colors aren't good enough. Oh, we need the glitter there. Oh, we need
And she was
buildings
patient
here.
with you, right?
She was very patient with me, because she knew also that I wanted something that would stand the test of time, and something that meant something. And I think when you guys see the artwork, you're gonna kind of, it's all gonna tie in,
Right.
because it needed to make sense that it was all for God, but all for you too. So
Yeah, we got some sweatshirts coming. It's going to be really cool. Okay, we got to break for 1 second. We're going to break. Okay, I think we were talking about the name of your album. I think that's where we left off, pretty much. And the meaning of that, we dove into a little bit about the history of, like, just the last 2 years and where you've been in Boston at the New England Conservatory. And you were also composing works for the Boston Ballet and Boston Calling, which is really, really cool. So I just want to kind of go back to then what brought you back out to California, and what did you do when you came out to California? I think you had an intent of this album, finishing this, right?
yeah, well, you know, it was really God who said go back to California, because I was so very much so like, I don't want to leave. And you know, I just specifically remember,
What were you holding on to? Just
my pride, holding on to my pride for sure. Because it's a lot to say, oh, I was at the number 2 school in the world for music.
right.
And that's very egotistical. And so God had to kind of remove that and humble me in that sense. But yeah, no, so I specifically remember in my room saying, God, tell me if I'm supposed to go. And he said, yes. I said, okay.
Okay.
I said, okay. And I think that's God oftentimes requires a sacrifice. And a lot of
Or what you think is a sacrifice at the moment, but actually maybe not, right?
well, it's not a sacrifice for God, because God doesn't need you. It's a sacrifice for yourself. You're doing this for God. God doesn't need your sacrifice. You're doing it to better yourself so that you can be in alignment with the Spirit. And so that was the main reason I left, was like I had a lot of stuff I wanted to do. I had a lot of compositions I wanted to do for the ballet. I went on a tour with them, just going and playing and stuff. And I came back and I just made a lot of music. I mean, I made 4 EPs.
I think you came back, I remember, on a break one time, a Christmas break, and pumped out like 3 videos and new songs, just made them on the fly. And I was like so blown away. I'm like, whoa, like, I think as your mom, I saw the transition from just like going into this new phase of just taking everything you learned and really utilizing it. And it was pretty cool to watch. But it does take a lot to leave an idea. I'm going to say that, to leave like maybe the idea of something. So I think when you go to college, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, you think that you're going with the idea that I need to do this in order to be this. Am I right?
Yeah.
And is that true? Or what do you think after, what did you do? You came back, and where are you now?
Well, I came back and I had to do a lot of reevaluating of kind of, my path. And it wasn't so much like a serious reevaluation, but it was more of a spiritual reevaluation and, just kind of recentering, my motives, my goals, my ambitions, and just allowing God to kind of just take over. And I think that's the whole purpose I want people to take away from this album is like, when you let God take over, then you can walk into your destiny. And so it's like, I had a thought like 2 days ago when something really miraculous happened that I'd been praying for my entire life, and God spoke to me and he said, it's not that happened. That's always been there for you. You just walked into it.
Wow.
And so it's like,
can I cry on live stream?
It's like God has these gifts prepared for us. He has these things prepared for us, but it's our choice if we want to walk into what he has for us. Amen. And having the faith to say, God knows what's best for me more than I know what's best for me is, I think, the biggest turning point for me when I came back from Boston.
Wow. I'm kind of blown away right now as his mom, just listening to those words, because I think as a parent, you want your kids to say that. Like what you just said is exactly finding your value, not in what the world thinks, but really finding the value in what God thinks about you and your life, and just knowing and trusting him that is a great direction to go into. And I'm so proud of you. I can say that because I'm here in this moment, but I'm just so proud of you for just stepping into that, because I know how hard it was to leave. Yeah. So I want to kind of loop back around and talk about so we talked about the kid next door and accountability, but there's a song that was really the first song you talked about when you were making this album, which was Royalty. And it's one of my favorite songs on your album, on your new album.
One of mine.
Yeah, it really is. And let me just say real quick, I saw you play in LA. Your agency, modeling agency, LA Models, hosted Jesse. Hosted a, what was it? Other People's Children hosted a live concert in LA, and I got to see some of these songs played live, and the musicianship, and I just couldn't believe, I was blown away at how amazing these songs were live, and the musicians that you have are just these incredible musicians. I mean, you're talking horn players, saxophone, drummers. Like, I've just never seen anything. Keyboard players. I don't think I've ever seen anything in a while, except for Snarky Puppy. But at Boston Calling, was it you're the one you Chance? No, what? No, Anderson .Paak. Anderson .Paak. I'm a mom, so I don't know all these, but Anderson .Paak kind of had that feel with just the live band. Bruno Mars has that too a little bit. But it was really cool for me to see that. Go ahead and tell me about Royalty a little bit.
So Royalty was the product of a night where I didn't want to go into the studio. I had been on like a studio bender per se for the past like several days, where I had like gone in the studio till like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. every single night that week, and I was just burnt out. And I came home and it was midnight, and I was like, man, I would love to go to the studio and work on something, but that voice inside me was like, you are so tired. I was like, I know I'm exhausted. I was like, and I don't have anything I'd want to go to record. And so I was like, okay, well, let me sit down on the couch and let me just play around with the guitar, because that's what I'm going to do if I'm going to go to the studio anyways. And if I get an idea, then I'll go. And I sat down, and the first chords I played were royalty. The first four chords I played were G major to F sharp dominant 7 to B minor.
Can you just show them just like on the guitar real quick? Just
I don't have my.
Where's your?
I don't have my hollow body, but anyways,
it's really cool.
Actually, I think I do have my guitar.
Yeah, I just want you to show them, just because I think it's just so memorable, the chords in that song.
So I sat down, much like I'm doing right now. I sat down with this guitar, and I sat down and I said, okay. And the first thing I played was. And right then, I knew, I was like, oh, this is something. This is something that I really like. And so I just went again. And I had already written, fun fact, royalty was actually the lyrics were supposed to go on another song.
Really?
I had written and recorded a completely new song, a different song, like a month prior to writing those chords, and it was all the lyrics for royalty.
Wow.
And so I sat down and I played this, and I was like, royalty is what she is to me. I'll tell her honestly how and right then I was like, oh, that fits so much more so what I wanted. And I was like, but it's not enough. And so what I did was
Is it about a girl, real quick? I don't know this fact, so I'm going to ask him this. Was royalty about like your vision of maybe your future wife or what you want in the future?
Totally. It was a vision of how I'm going to treat my wife in the future, someone who respects me, but I respect them too. And it's this symbiotic relationship of love. And I think that sometimes it's very much so lost in today's culture, where we get into ideas of sex and ideas of gender and ideas of race, and we try to divide each other into these sections.
You're just saying unity.
I'm just saying,
God, right?
listen, I'm just saying I'm going to treat my wife like royalty because that's what she is to me.
I love
And those are the lyrics. Royalty is what she is to me. I'll tell her honestly how I feel. And it's like, I want to be able to have honest conversations with my wife.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to shelter or cuddle the conversation. I just want to be honest. I think that's all that we want in relationships, is to be honest with each other. And that's the only way that, it's like the best speaker in the room is the one who listens. And it's like, and I want someone who's going to listen to me, and I'll listen to them, and they'll tell me how they feel, and I'll tell them how they feel, and being honest.
Yeah.
I think the whole message of royalty is honest. Like, I want to be honest with a girl. I don't want to sugarcoat things.
Well, I like the fact you said listening, because I just know how important that is in today's culture, to be a good listener, and it's very much something that's being left behind, I think. So,
well, people want to be right.
Yeah, more than they want to listen.
People, I posted something about this on Instagram a couple nights ago, and I said people are afraid to be wrong.
Right.
No, it's like a cardinal sin to be wrong now. It's like, it's crazy, this thing, like, if you don't know something about a certain topic, then you're automatically disqualified from that conversation.
you're saying like we've eliminated the process of almost like being able to learn things, and
No one can learn
Right.
anymore.
I agree with that, actually.
No one can learn anymore. It's tough to learn now because people judge you if you don't know something.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And I think going back to royalty, that night was such an honest night for me, because I was like, I don't want to go into the studio and just mess around and not come out with anything. I want to have something. And so I wrote those chords, and then the next thing I did was I had a necklace on, and my necklace was hanging over my guitar like this. And it was creating this sound. And I was like,
no way.
and I was like, oh, this sounds so cool. So what I did is I took my phone and I recorded the sound of my chain playing against my guitar. And if you listen to the record,
Oh, I love
you'll
that.
hear it the entire time.
Can you play that?
I'll play
it's
a few
so
right
cool
now.
because
Here,
It's one of my favorite parts of the song, actually, because it's so like, I want to just like, I know this is like so, am I old lady doing this? But I just want to vibe with it because it's just such a good vibe.
Okay, I don't know if it's gonna record while we'll see.
you just play it on your phone, maybe through the
No, it's okay.
through the microphone.
So there's the guitar, and I'll fast forward a little bit so you can hear it. If you listen, you'll hear
Is
it.
that it? Is it like a chain sound almost? Oh my gosh.
It's there. It's all those little rattles are my chain on. Oh my gosh.
That's so cool.
So that's how that happened, and yeah, and so it was that, and then it was this animal.
Oh, hey, Silly Grandpa gets a shout out real quick because he gave him that.
It was the duck.
Your
it was
grandpa
it was
who's
the
on his
duck.
way
It was
right
the duck. It was the guitar, and that's basically the entire snare sound.
Wow.
And the entire hi-hats are all my chain over the guitar and this duck. So
Wow.
That's incredible. I love hearing the thought process behind this because I feel like I was talking to his sister Sage the other day and she was telling me she listened to the whole album and she just said, "Mom, it's so special." She's like, it's just from the Lord. And I was like, yeah, it is. And sorry, I'm getting emotional, but I knew it too when I heard it. It was so special, and I think that it's the increments of these things that are so brilliant in the album that really come out in the music that you don't hear nowadays. Like I remember hearing songs where I was so inspired by, in the past, different music, and I think this is what is just really unique about your album this time is that you've done these things and they've been inspired in different ways. So to hear that is really cool. Let's talk about. I want to talk about No Apologies next.
okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good where
Probably
to go.
probably one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song. It's probably my favorite song, if not my favorite song
No
on
Apologies.
the album.
Yeah. So tell us about it.
Oh, okay. Well,
So tell us about it.
it's a crazy accumulation of things. It initially stemmed from me wanting to, because I've kind of found this niche on the guitar that I love, which is kind of this percussive element of the guitar, and I'll actually play it because now we're doing this, so why not play it for you guys? And
Yeah, it's kind of turned into a live show.
kind of turn into
Why
a
not?
live show. Why not? I'll grab a stick.
We're just winging this.
So there's this idea on the guitar where it's very congruent of like lo-fi or like of R&B where it's very very laid back in the pocket, almost to the point where it's dragging. And so I loved this idea, and I was playing around with some chords that Thundercat and Anderson .Paak used, like all those major 9 shapes. And so what I did was I was like, okay, I really love this groove. And so that's the basis for the entire song, are those movements. And then I'm super into like bass chords. And so this is kind of like the song of my dreams.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's all the stuff that really fascinates me that, in one song. So it's like the piano.
Yeah, tell me how you know, babe. Is that the?
Yeah, tell me. Well, actually, those lyrics stemmed from a session in Nashville when I had just come off a small tour playing Boston Calling, and I went to Nashville, and we were at that bar, the Flamingo Bar.
Oh yeah.
And I was playing with Daru Jones.
Very cool place in Nashville, by the way.
Josh and Josh is actually the pianist on the record playing that, and he recorded those in Nashville. But anyways, we made that song up on the fly. we made up those lyrics on the fly, at least.
Well, I hadn't heard that song. I didn't hear it at all until it was played live in Los Angeles with other people's children. And it was literally, I said, I remember people getting up and dancing to it in the club because it was so vibey. And I was like, and I said to Michael afterwards, I was like, people were digging that song. What is that song? I go, did you just make that up on the fly? And he's like, no.
Well, the lyrics are actually me talking about an experience I had at a concert with a girl that I had ended up making out with that night. Whatever. Sorry, mom. But it's me talking about, living in the world and living in sin, and it's me talking about, the first lyric is body feeling really high, Aztec gods up in the sky, mind is flying, can't ignore this moment, it is passing by. And so it's talking about how we can fall into sin, and I'm no exception for that. Like I live in sin all the time because I'm a human.
Yeah.
And it's just talking about that. It's like Aztec gods, meaning like the gods of humans, like that we've created for ourselves, is sin. And so that's what that whole song's about. And it's tell me how you tell me how you tell me how you tell me how you feel, babe. It's me talking about the girl and just this weird relationship that we have all the time in this hookup culture in America today, where we fall in love with a girl or a guy for
a second,
4 hours.
Right, for a second. Yeah.
And is that like really like natural and like is it godly? And like I think those are the things that go through your mind. Like, but I love that you're honest about it, because I think people need to be real. I think there's not enough real people like just saying hey and saying that nowadays. Like as Christians, I think I would remember being raised where you had to be a certain way or something like that. But that's really not who God is. God is forgiving and loving and right? Wouldn't you say that? What would you say?
Yeah, well, I would just say that the entire album is about being honest.
Yeah.
And it's all about just. And I remember I think it was the baby who there's a quote in one of his songs where he says, "I made my first million off of the realest-ish I ever wrote."
Really?
And so, or maybe that's J. Cole, some rapper in that field. But anyways, I took that line and I was like, wow, he's actually speaking truth. He's saying, I was honest in this song and I made the most money off of it because people were able to connect to it because it was honest.
Wow. That's
I just love hearing about each one of these because it's news to me too. Just so you guys know, I'm hearing some of these things for the first time. Some of these things Michael and I have talked about, but it's really been fun for me to talk to you today about this too. Let's talk about Sunday Sunrises next.
Yeah, well, that's actually that's a cover song from a song I believe written in the 70s, and I first heard the song from Isaiah Sharkey, who's most people know him as John Mayer's rhythm guitar player. Tours with John Mayer, but he's also an artist within his own rights and respect, and is probably one of my favorite guitar players of all time. And I heard him play Sunday. It's actually Morning Sunrise is the name of the original song.
I love it.
And I heard him play it, and so I transcribed his playing, and I was always like, oh, I'm going to go sample his playing. But then I was like, well, why don't I just learn it? Why don't I just learn what he was doing and then incorporate it in my own manner? And so that was the byproduct of that song. And it's actually funny because that song was written in 2 sessions on the same day. And the first session started at like 1 p.m. And it lasted until like 6 p.m. But then I stopped and I ended up going surfing down the street because I'm close to a beach. But anyways, I went there and I surfed the sunset, which was like such a beautiful sunset. It was like just glowing over the water, and I was just surfing. It was just warm out. It was peaceful. And I was like, wow, this is exactly the embodiment I want to feel when I'm listening to this, is the sun rising in the morning. And I think really the harmony not only represents that. I changed the harmony a little bit, but just the entire... The totality of the song is really kind of that.
I love that song.
It's just very soothing to me when I hear it. It's a very soothing song. So you guys will have to listen to that on the album when it comes out. The next one I want to talk to you about is actually one of my favorites, Virtue by Piano. So I'm a huge fan of Michael's compositions. I don't think he's released any yet on iTunes, but I'm really looking forward to when he releases some of his piano compositions from the Boston Ballet that he's created, for these works, which are classical. What you describe it, because I'm going to massacre this. So.
They're like modern classical piano pieces, basically, that I did for the Boston Ballet. But going back to that piece, that was the first time that I actually started sampling. That was like one of the first songs that I started sampling, and the way that I sample this is through this old Korg M80 piano from the early 2000s that my mother actually bought me earlier on. And a side note, whenever I'm buying equipment, or I've bought an equipment in the past, I never regret I never regret purchasing the best thing I could at that time, because it always brings me more value over time. And that piano that my mother bought me 15 years ago, I now start using its sample library that I never even knew it had. But anyways, that was the byproduct of the first time I was trying to make Flume-esque, music, because I grew up on that. And
what is Flume-esque? What is that?
Flume is an artist.
Oh, see,
Flume is an artist, and so like Flume-esque,
Flume-esque.
So like kind of in that style. But that was the first time I ever tried, those orientations of rhythm and stuff, and that whole entire song is really just one big experiment of rhythm, because there's so many different moments in there where there's quintuplets and there's stuff going on. There's 5/3 and there's 9/5 and 9/4 and all these weird meters that you don't really recognize, because it's this hi-hat pattern that's just there.
That was in the sample that was there, or is that you created that?
I created that. The samples are basically just like, that's a sample.
Right.
And then I take that and I make it.
Can we just address this, because this is interesting. I just want to talk about how your brain works because I feel like it is not conventional. Like the way you think about music is very out of the box a little bit, and I think that's where you're getting these very cool, unique sounds and songs. So go ahead.
Well, I'm not limited by what came before me. I'm limited only by my imagination. We live in a time today where you can create anything as long as you can imagine it. And so that's kind of my ambition as I walk into my own artistry, is to not be limited by what came before me, and not say that I can't do anything, because we live in a time where you can do anything. You can post you can post one TikTok and have it get 2 million views and change your entire life. You can write a song and post it on SoundCloud and have it change your life. You can do anything. There is no limitations anymore. And so when people talk about how bad the music industry is now, I say no, because it's open gates. It's given everyone an equal opportunity to upload music, to produce music, to let go of music.
So maybe it's in the past, now it's harder to make money in the music industry, I would say, maybe, right? Is that right? Or
well, no, not necessarily. It's always been hard to make money in the music industry. And I think that's the tough part, is that people who grew up in the 80s and were doing session work, when it was at the golden age of session work, from like all the way from the 40s to the 80s, it's like people talk about that as the golden age of money and stuff. It's like, well, no, you understood a skill and you capitalized on it. Now it's just a different ballgame.
Right.
You just have to learn a certain skill and capitalize on that. And now I think people are less inclined to do that because it's not so cut and dry.
Right.
It's not black and white. Yeah. It used to be make music, get signed to a label, you're there.
Well, back in the day, it was really for us, and I remember this, the first time MTV came on, this is going to tell you how old I am, but the first time MTV came on, it was like so impactful. I'll never forget it. I was like, this is rad. I was so excited for MTV because it was just this incredible platform to see artists, and then they featured videos, and you could see the newest videos. And I think nowadays, like, it's so taken for granted because like everything's accessible, right? Like everything in video, and it's so instantaneous almost. But at the same time, things get lost in translation, maybe, right? Like there's so much content versus like, how's that working? Like so much content going out. How do people find people anymore?
Or how do they find new content? Like, what do you think? Because you're kind of that.
Well, there's more outlets now than there used to be.
Right.
The record store used to be the outlet, and the radio.
Right.
It's basically it.
Right. Now there's a
or
lot.
live concerts, know, and so now the outlet is infinite. You can post music on TikTok and have that audio be used a billion times.
Right.
And there's so many different ways of releasing music now. People are releasing music on Instagram.
Yeah.
People are dropping albums on Instagram.
Are they really?
Yeah, they're just putting it on IGTV. And people are dropping albums on YouTube, and so I'm all in the game of releasing free music. I love that because I think that if the music was, we obviously want to make money,
right?
But if the music isn't there to touch someone and change someone's life, then what's the purpose of the music?
I love that. I love that because That's the way I feel about music too. Like it's touched my life. Like when I listen to music, when I listen to anything, I can pinpoint where I was at that time in my life, and I think that's what music does for us. Is it actually it creates a memory almost, right, in our life. It creates a memory for us. Yeah. Like you said about the Beatles album, like you can remember listening to Hey Jude back in the day. Let's see, did we go to Different Planets yet? No. Let's talk about Different Planets.
So Different Planets would technically be the first song ever made for the album. Because,
really?
Because the original bass line was the byproduct of a re-recording session for a recording session I did 2 years ago.
Wait.
It was a re-recording session for a recording session I did 2.5 years ago.
Can you play it for me? Because I got to remember. Do you have it on there? Which one is it?
What, Different Planets?
Uh-huh.
It's this.
Oh, I love this.
So that bass line was originally taken from a completely different song that I'd written for the album 2.5 years ago. And so was the snare. And so that song just came about, and I remember recording it in the studio, and I mean, that song has been taken for so long. And the collaboration with Apollo Bebop, who's the bass player playing it, Dominic Cruz and Donovan Cruz on he's not I just sampled his snare hit, and then Brian to Earth, obviously from Apollo Bebop, who they are releasing an album May 1st.
And they're incredible. I've seen them.
Incredible.
I've seen them live. They're incredible.
And so they're featured on the album and on that song. And I think Brian and I had wanted to work together for so long on a song, and it just kind of all came together for that one because
that's one of my favorite songs.
He's a very heartfelt singer, and he's a very heartfelt person. He thinks a lot about things, and so yeah, I think it just really just stars aligned with that. Do we have any questions, Justin, by any chance, or?
Do we want to do that separately and record everything?
Yeah, maybe.
I feel like that'd be a good.
Yeah, I agree with.
So it looks a little different too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to
keep going?
wrap this up or keep going?
We've got a few more questions to ask.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a couple more questions. I think we need to loop back a little bit. You came back to California, right? Because we never finished this. Came back to California, and so you enrolled and you switched your major. You were a guitar studies major, right? And what did you go into? Why don't you tell everybody what you did and where you went?
So I ended up going to Biola University, which is a Christian university in La Mirada, and I ended up going into music composition, which is a completely different field than I had ever gone into. I think mostly because, and actually the whole reason, because I wanted to expand my palette. Something that I'd never done before. I'm the first one to jump into the pool that no one else wants to jump into.
So what is your favorite song on this album? Let's go back to that. What is your favorite song? Your personal favorite.
What do you mean by favorite? Because I love all these songs, and I don't think I could choose one. But if we're talking about like production, I could choose one.
Okay, so let's talk about what is the most intricately played. What was the most like complicated production? Which song?
Probably. It's a tough one because they're all very methodical in their production, but I would probably say We Don't Stop has the most.
I love that song.
It doesn't have the most elements, but the elements are from all corners of the earth. The trumpet was recorded in Boston, the bass was recorded in Boston, part of the guitar was recorded in that previous studio, part of it was recorded in Boston. The drums were recorded in the previous studio. Some of the vocals were recorded there. All the gospel vocals were recorded here, and so it's been a real journey with that song, and it even got to the point where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to release this because it never felt there. But the last session I had for it finally was there.
It's an awesome song.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite songs because it's just a gem for me.
And the last song on your album is Give Me Jesus. I just want you to tell everybody a little bit about that song because that's kind of
So I was in a really dark place when I was living in Boston, and the first thing that you hear when you hear that is a vinyl texture and my mother, a private phone call that I had with my mother.
I didn't know he was recording.
A private phone call that I had with my mother giving me advice on that situation and telling me that I don't have to be captive to my situation and that I can be free to do whatever I want. And so the gospel vocals that you hear in there singing Give Me Jesus was when I first moved to Boston. The very first day I went into my school, the New England Conservatory of Music, and I walked in and I heard this gospel choir singing Give Me Jesus, this secular school talking about Jesus. And it was like,
Yeah, I didn't even just think about that until just
completely
now.
secular
Wow.
school singing Give Me Jesus on the first
Can
day.
you just play them a piece of that? Because it's just so beautiful. Just play them a piece of that. You don't have to play me in it, but just play that section of it maybe.
B.
So you can hear it.
You should only be looking to God for who you know the way that God made you.
Just like keep playing it for a second.
No. So I was just bawling when that happened, because I was just so taken back by it that would happen.
Yeah, I'm kind of blown away right now in this moment. Like I said, I'm learning things that I didn't even know at the time when he was walking through this. And that's just so cool to know that God gave you that moment, just that little piece. He was like, I'm here, right? I'm here. You're not alone. It's cool. Okay, so one last thing I had to ask you. Let's see. What can people... when can they expect this album to drop, and what can they expect from you in the future?
So
Because your future self.
May 11th, the album drops on all platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, everything. And that's it. And then tour dates. Let's
right.
go. So big tour after that, when everything quarantine opens up, and a lot of shows and stuff. And so, yeah, just all for you. But I do have another 4 albums on the deck after all for you. So,
And you just opened a website, and why don't you give everybody just kind of where they can find this when it comes out, like if they want to find
you
your
just type in
sweatshirts and merchandise and everything.
Future Self Music on the internet, you'll find my website, and you'll be able to go in and you'll be able to see all the stuff that's going on, all the merchandise that's going on, all the new albums, all the new products, all the tour dates and stuff. So if you're interested, if you like All For You, if you like what you've heard right now, you can definitely go and check that out.
All right, you guys. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. God bless you guys. May 11th, All For You.